Just before I start, I wanted to get like a show of hands in the room as to who's heard of ServiceNow. So I'd say about 50%. Okay, so I might spend about 5 minutes talking a little bit about the company so that for those that are not aware of what we do, you've got a bit of an overview. ServiceNow was established in 2004 in the US in San Diego. It's a SaaS company that essentially provides a platform to drive workflow solutions and really digitizing the enterprise. Our founder, Fred Luddy, was ex-BMC, Peregrine, etc. He sort of started the application with service management in mind and IT service management, but that's really grown. So I'm going to touch a little bit about where the platform is today and also a little bit about where we're headed. And I want to spend a little bit of time on customer use cases because that's really important in the context of people that are here. ServiceNow was the second company after Salesforce to exceed the 1 billion SaaS revenue target in 2015, and we're growing 40 to 50% year on year since then. So we're expected to be a 4 billion company by 2020, and we're well on track for that. India is an emerging market, but unsurprisingly, there are a lot of skilled people in India that work in countries in North America and Europe, etc., on the platform. And Fujitsu is a key partner of ours. So the 4 sections I was going to cover off was a little bit about the platform, some finance use cases, because I was led to believe that there are a few people here that leverage SAP and feel the pain through the core ERP side of things and what we've done in terms of augmenting SAP as a platform. We use SAP for financials ourselves, so I'll touch on what our CFO uses the platform for. And then a little bit about a state of work survey, which is we survey about anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 customers on an annual basis, from C-level through to senior managers, and some of the findings there and how they're shaping where the product is headed. I always like to start on this slide. The standard expectations from a business perspective whenever you deploy new technology, the first one, no matter what whoever says, is to drive efficiency. Now, whether it's hard dollars out of the business or improve productivity, however you want to measure that metric, that's kind of the first thing. The second one is most CFOs expect that new technology should improve their risk profile from a business perspective. If your legacy technology has got an X risk profile, it must be X minus N, and whatever that N might be when you deploy new stuff. The third is velocity, so time to deploy value. So gone are the days where projects ran into months and years. The average ServiceNow deployment runs anywhere between 3 to 4 months, depending on, and we're talking large customers like GE, Siemens, etc., deploying projects within 1 quarter cycle because they want to get value for the investment that they're making. And the last thing that we're focused on, which is probably the most important, is experience. So if you think about enterprise technology and think about consumer technology, we call that the experience gap. So think about everybody here must be using Outlook in some way, shape, or form. How much has Outlook changed in the last 10 years? Not much. How much have you changed the way you use Outlook in the last 10 years? Probably not much. So I think, whereas if you look at, you talked about Uber earlier and all of those fancy applications, I don't think one of them was an enterprise application, right? They were all consumer applications. So as an organization, we're doing a pretty heavy investment in bringing a lot of these consumer experience designers. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we announced that we acquired a design company called Telepathy in San Diego, and we're kind of bringing in talent and sort of shifting and challenging the ways that some of the legacy developers in our organization think as well, to say, you know what, you should be, and I'll touch on one of the examples around how they've influenced the way we're designing the product as well. Why this slide is very important is as our platform grows, each product team has to have these 4 principles in mind as they're building new products. So if you don't take all 4 of these boxes, we don't go live with that part of the product. So forgetting the functionality that you roll out, it should be able to tick all 4 of these boxes before we GA the product. And we do have a fairly aggressive cycle. So we do 2 releases a year, and they're major releases. And again, because it's a SaaS product, the cost of that release is largely kind of, apart from integrations that you might have done into your existing ecosystem, that's part of the service offering that you buy with ServiceNow. And most of our customers are sort of N-1 or N-2 in terms of the application. I'd say 95% of them. The reality in organizations is this is how work usually happens. You have a bunch of departments and you have a bunch of requesters. And we talked about ticket management systems, etc. But again, they're very localized and they might be for one function or the other. At the end of the day, you still need to jump on the phone. You need to send an email to somebody. And often it's about who you know, what process, rather than what process you should be following to get things done. And that's kind of what we're really trying to address at a platform level within ServiceNow. The reason is why work is so disjointed is traditionally, and even now, most organizations work very much in a sort of departmental siloed structure. And if I look at a use case, the employee or the customer probably needs services deployed across multiple departments. So take a simple example of employee onboarding, right? So there are at least 3 or 4 departments involved in onboarding an employee. And that is typically the worst experience that the employee has when they join any organization. And that being the first experience that the employee has, it doesn't help from a retention perspective, right? So I think if you look at what we're trying to do is just apply simple disciplines of service management that have been in place for a long time. So things like a structured product catalog, things like reporting, to see, where are the blockages within the workflow, having an integration ecosystem so that we kind of talk into the various applications along the way to get work done, and really applying that to deliver end-to-end use cases from a customer and employee perspective. The platform is fairly complex, and if I were to talk to each of these, I think we'll be here till 7:30 this evening, and nobody wants to be there. But the key is all of this is available in the one environment. So if you're a ServiceNow customer, you get an instance and you get all this capability, right? And it's depending on what you subscribe. So if you're an IT service management subscriber, you'll get your service management processes. The platform is at the bottom, so your CMDB or your database, your workflow engine, your notification engine, your service portal, your catalog, all of them are platform features that every customer gets. And then these rings are kind of the other products and services that we deliver for our customers. 4 really interesting things that I'm going to talk about towards the end are these 4: anomaly detection, predictive modeling, peer benchmarking, and performance forecasting. They were capabilities that we added in the platform in the last release, and our releases are named by letters every 6 months. The last one was Jakarta for J. The next one is Kingston. M is, unfortunately, Madrid. We couldn't get Mumbai or Melbourne. I live in Australia, but what can we do? But again, we acquired an AI organization called DX Continuum. And when ServiceNow acquires an organization, we build the IP into our code base. We don't integrate it together. So the capability that we acquire is available for all of our customers to consume. I won't talk through the rest, but if anybody has any questions, we've got a booth outside, or feel free to come and talk to me afterwards. I talked about that single system of action. This is typically what most of our mature customers, leverage us for. So they would typically start with IT, then they look at HR, they look at finance, some of the areas, and I'll talk about even customer service. Some of the areas that have got the least amount of automation are the areas that they want to address leveraging the platform. And the good thing is once an employee gets a good experience from an employee portal perspective, that's a self-service channel they'll go back to. But it's important to provide that experience not just from a look and feel perspective, but also to give them the right information at the right time. You can have the best looking car, but if it's got a 40-year-old engine inside it, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So I think that's kind of, you need to temper it off with the information that you provide. And some of the outcomes of having that single system of action are, improved governance and control, standardized reporting, a framework for continual improvement, and so forth. And clearly experience is key as well as part of that. So before I move on to a couple of the examples, any questions so far, or is it fairly straightforward? Yep.
So recently, we are a customer of ServiceNow as well as partner.
Okay.
Recently, we heard that you're expiring your express and moving to enterprise.
Yep.
So what is the strategy around it, and why
So all customers that were on Express are going to be migrated onto Enterprise at no extra cost to the customer. From a migration strategy perspective, it's going to be customer by customer. So, either your support person or your salesperson will be in touch to kind of manage. It's not like the product has been sunset. The product is still there. And the strategy is to migrate everybody on Enterprise, because what we thought was even commercial customers or customers that are not using us in a large capacity will still have the need to kind of use other capability within the platform, so we didn't want to restrict them to kind of a really smaller set. But yeah, you should, either the support team or the sales team will be in touch to kind of talk about the process from an upgrade perspective. Yeah. Couple of interesting examples within our CFO office. I think even finance people dread getting into SAP to do their month-end tasks, right? So our CIO is a big believer. We've got a new CIO. He started a couple of years ago now. I guess he's not that new, but his plan was to kind of, if we're the single system of engagement across the enterprise, we should also be looking at areas that typically don't use ServiceNow. So they looked at, from a finance person's perspective, what are the tasks they need to do to close month end? And could we do some of them in ServiceNow? Now, SAP is still the ERP platform that underpins it, but the engagement layer, the interaction layer, can we use ServiceNow for that? And a really interesting use case, right? So they found that the challenges they had were, unproductive employees, lots of manual processes. How can we use the platform to automate that? And this is the dashboard that an accounting person sees now in ServiceNow when they come on. So they don't really need to get into SAP at all. The whole close management suite, and they kind of manage all of their tasks up here. So what are the open tasks? How many of them are past due? Across which percentage of the application are the tasks overdue? How do they work on it? And the whole interface is actually built in ServiceNow for them to use. If you ask me to operate this, I probably won't be able to because I'm not an accountant, but essentially we got some really strong outcomes. And we kind of moved from, about 5,000 emails to 3,000 tasks. We had about a 40% uplift in productivity in the core finance team, which is great if you're a CFO. Ironically, people don't lose their jobs in the CFO's office. They get shifted to more productive work. And then, about 1,200 integrated JEs. So there was just a improvement from a risk profile perspective, etc. The other one that they also deployed, and again in the finance space, was purchasing and asset management. So, we used to have something like 30,000 emails for 2,000 POs that used to be generated on a monthly basis in the organization. And we said, well, we're a system of action. Why do we need to use emails to approve POs, right? We should be kind of drinking our own champagne, or one of those analogies. And this is a really long slide that builds out, but I'll just build it out all together. But essentially, we did a ERP integration with SAP that runs across these 13 processes that essentially ends up for the PO to be raised, approvals of the PO to happen within ServiceNow, the update to happen, the asset record updated in the CMDB, and then the financial record updated in the ERP space. So essentially, we use ServiceNow for all of our hardware and software asset management, and ERP is the source of truth from a financial perspective for the same. And again, we don't need to get into SAP. So, business owners used to hate going into SAP to approve POs, so they don't need to do that. It all comes in the one single dashboard for them. Moving on. Again, some really interesting stats. So, new vendor approvals. We didn't change it too much, but it went down by about 20% roughly. Standard PO prep went to 2 days from 5. Manual entries into SAP were eliminated altogether, which was a big productivity uplift there for us. And again, you can read the others. But essentially, the whole kind of outcome there was not just improvement in productivity, but a much more happier workforce in terms of the way they used to work. And again, some significant savings, and we had a strong NPS increase. So that's a concept of visual task boards that you can actually go on your iPad and touch on it, approve things, move things from queues, etc. So that kind of covers off a couple of those use cases. We've got plenty of others talking into other applications that we can talk to you about afterwards. But I thought I'll spend 5 minutes on state of work. So we surveyed about 1,850 executives from C-level through to kind of senior managers. And we said, and again, this survey is available on our website. It's an 8-page report that I've condensed into 5 bullet points. But, anyone can go there and download it. But, the whole theme around digitization and, improving efficiency of the way you work is very apparent because most organizations, 9 out of 10 are saying that by 2020, if they don't increase the level of automation in their environments, they won't be able to handle the BAU volume of activity, even if business doesn't grow, because transactions are growing. The other thing was highly automated companies were 6 times more likely than others to have double-digit revenue growth, and that kind of, more productive employees can drive activity into more productive outcomes for the business. This was quite interesting. So we launched our HR and customer service products, which are really that engagement channel and automation across those 2 groups. But they were the 2 areas that we found from a business process automation perspective are the worst. And it's interesting because these 2 areas impact your employees and your customers, which are probably the most important stakeholder groups in an organization, right? So clearly there was a lot of resonance there. And again, most executives actually believe that rather than creating job losses, it'll create more productive jobs that they can drive within the organizations. And then finally, there's lots of work being spent on admin tasks, and I talked about a couple of examples that talk to that as well. Again, interesting stat, I talked about the experience gap, but this just, and we've surveyed a few people, didn't go back to the 70s, but in the last 10 years, this is just information that we found, is the experience that people have with workplace as well as in their consumer lives from a IT or a computer perspective. And in the 70s, that was, workplace experience was better because you couldn't afford to have a mainframe in your house. So, clearly that kind of interjected in the mid-90s, and we've just seen this massive shift where the consumer experience, and it's not like the workplace experience in the applications has gone backwards, but the satisfaction with that experience has gone backwards because your consumer experience has shot up so much. And then when you look at millennials coming into the workforce, their expectation, and my daughter's not quite that old yet, but when I talk to her and some of her friends, they're really kind of, they don't even know what email is, right? They're really kind of communicating with various other forms of communication through their social media and kind of devices. But essentially, we call this the experience gap, and that's what we're trying to really plug and kind of go. Interestingly, I was presenting this in Japan, and they said, no, but we've got an aging workforce. I said, okay, well, clearly the wrong example in this context, but everywhere else, apart from Japan, that's kind of the trend and where things are headed. And then when we kind of dug a bit under the covers to say what are the top 5 things that are causing this, first one is clearly it needs to be easy to use. If it doesn't have a good-looking interface, people can't navigate through it. They're not going to start using it at all. The second one we thought might be mobility or social or something like that, but it ended up being access to the right information. And it makes sense, right? Because if it's a good interface, you start using it, but then you don't get what you need from it, why are you going to use it again? It's the easiest detractor for people to start kind of going back to the way they used to do things. And then the rest are kind of, improved productivity, collaboration, mobility, all of that. And, sorry, I didn't have another slide, which is quite important. So the 3 things that we focus on when we're building the app is it needs to be clearly easy to use, really nice look and feel. It needs to be mobile, and there needs to be some kind of social aspect to it. So as you bring in new people into the workforce, they like collaborating through chat rather than trying to email somebody about something or sending a task off to someone. So that's kind of the key within the platform. And in that sense, where are we going? So UX is always going to be key for us because that is a differentiator for us today, and we want to kind of stay ahead there. But the other thing is really just intelligence in everything. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the user experience aspects of it. mindful I'm running way over, so I'll try and wrap up in a couple of minutes. But we focus on these two personas, so the requester and the provider. And again, we've got plenty of experiences on this website called snexperiences.com that customers can use. We've got about 80 different mobile experiences that you can lift and shift, whether it's an onboarding experience or a service outage experience, whatever that might be. I talked about these three. This is the concept of visual task boards. And this was born because our whole UX team, I think the oldest person's about 28. So even I feel old when I'm talking to them. And we hide them in our San Diego office next to the beach. They've got like sleeve tattoos and funny hair. Don't want to put them in front of execs, but they're really kind of challenging the norm. And one of the things that this whole visual task boards concept was born when one of the girls came up and she said, well, why do we have to do everything in lists? What is this obsession with lists that people have in enterprise software? And we're like, well, what do you propose? She's like, wouldn't it be easier if you could just drag and drop things into people's queues and pull people onto it? I was like, yeah, it would be. So they kind of defined it, and that's probably outside of IT, because I think people in IT are still obsessed with lists somehow, but outside of IT, we find that that is the biggest adoption kind of mechanism, whether it's HR or any other kind of support space. And the interesting thing there is it's also driving down the time to value. So proficiency on the platform is something that really gets accelerated when people start using it. So they can literally drag and drop people onto things, and yeah. This is what our portal looks like, and some other customer examples. LinkedIn uses us internally for all of their enterprise service management. And the interesting thing is, all of this stuff downstairs doesn't exist. When you log onto the portal, all you've got is this search bar, and you type in what your query is, and it'll push up the right knowledge articles or the right forms that you need to fill in. And my boss, who's our global head of strategy, he spoke to their CIO, and he said, well, how come you haven't gone big on branding and all of these tiles that we see customers doing? And his answer was, the reason Google haven't changed their interface is because it works, right? So as long as you've kind of connected stuff underneath it that gives the people the information that they want, and you've done that background, and you talked about having the back end and having this big iceberg underneath the surface, that's where the complexity is, right? It's not what you're kind of seeing on top of the surface. Once you do that, the rest of the stuff then automatically helps itself. We're doing some interesting things with GE and other customers. I wanted to spend 2 minutes on this and I'll wrap up. So the 4 things that we're focused on from an intelligent automation perspective, and then this is growing in terms of the way that when the platform grows. One of the things that we've done from an anomaly detection perspective is the system can now recognize patterns. So if it starts to ingest events from Splunk or whatever other monitoring tool that you've got out there, it can look at patterns and then tell you, and you can set the business rules. It's a combination of ML and AI, cognitive, non-cognitive, but it'll kind of go, okay, well, the last time there was this issue on this server, which caused a bit of a performance degradation. 4 hours after that, you had an outage. And if it sees that pattern 8 or 10 times, however you defined it, it'll automatically create an incident, notify the service owner as soon as it sees that first alert to say, by the way, an incident is imminent. Do you want to do something about it? So that's quite interesting when you're managing large environments, and it becomes even more interesting when you've related your infrastructure to the services that are supported on top of it. So, and some of our customers, for example, when a server and a router is supporting a bill payment gateway, have said even if you detect a pattern once, you want to notify somebody because it can have a critical business impact. Where we're going with this is the next release in Kingston will have autonomy, not Kingston. In London, which is mid next year, we'll have this concept of recommendations that will come up along with the alerts. So the last 10 times you resolve this incident, this is what you did. Would you like to fire off that orchestration? The release after that is going to be autonomic remediation. So it's really going to drive, somebody will create the incident, the system will resolve it, and you just get notified. So that's an area that we're going to invest in heavily. Predictive modeling is really picking up keywords, identifying information coming through, auto-logging tickets, and routing them to the right resolver group, and doing that autonomically, even with chatbots. When you have an initial chat conversation, We've got our chatbots that can actually pick it up, create an incident or create a service request and assign it to the right resolver group. And we'll keep expanding on that capability. Peer benchmarks, we've got about 23 benchmarks. And typically the kind of information, because I came from customer land into ServiceNow, when I needed to look at how am I performing against the industry on these 10 KPIs, I would have to again engage a McKinsey or somebody like that, pay them $100,000 to get that report. That's available in the system live for any of our customers. You opt in, off you go. You can compare yourself against another 500 customers in your industry, and you can also break it down by region. And you've got your top KPIs around customer service, incident management, etc. And again, that'll keep growing. And we also give you a 6-month trend now to say, have you performed in the right direction over the last 6 months? Where are you headed? And then lastly, forecasting. On the back of our acquisition of DX Continuum, we have some algorithms that are in the platform that are miming your data. You can actually apply those algorithms to any data set that you have within ServiceNow, and it can then tell you, if you're on a trajectory to get to green. So for example, if your time to resolve an incident is going from 2 days to 1 day to so forth, it'll tell you if you want to go to 0.5, how long will it take to get there? And again, you can apply those algorithms, and then in terms of management kind of conversations, you can put that in front of management saying, if we don't invest, we're never going to get to where we need to get to. Or here's the trend, it'll take us 6 years to get there, or something along those lines. So it's just giving a lot more information. And a lot of this stuff will also be available offline based on personas in the next release. At the moment, it's mainly online, but we're building a lot of the offline capability. All right. Thank you, everybody.